On this day, 7 years ago, I was in hiding because my name was in the press in a way that humiliated me, and because I was scared for my physical and virtual safety. This is how I was introduced to the world.
Just last night, another big name was exposed.
New York's Attorney General Eric Schneiderman abruptly resigning 3 hours after The New Yorker published an article detailing abuse allegations from 4 different women.
Allegations of physical and verbal abuse, slapping, strangling, to the point 2 women say they had to go to the hospital.
Tanya Selvaratnam telling The New Yorker that the former Attorney General, quote, started calling me his brown slave and demanding that I repeat that I was his property.
If you would ask me to introduce myself, I'd say I'm a writer and filmmaker. I was born in Sri Lanka, and I grew up in Long Beach, California, otherwise known as the LBC, home of Snoop Doggy Dogg, Cameron Diaz, and Queen Mary, the boat. I have 2 degrees from Harvard, where I studied Chinese language and the history of law. I love to dance and wiggle, and host dinner parties for my friends. I think of birthdays not so much as growing 1 year older, but as knowing my friends 1 year longer. When people see how much joy I have around my friends, work, and life, they might be surprised to know that I'm a survivor of many things, including domestic violence. I'm grateful to be able to speak out, while most victims suffer in silence because of the shame and the stigma. I grew up watching horrific domestic violence between my parents. In my earliest memory, I am clutching a stuffed bunny and crying at the top of my lungs as I watch my father beat my mother. I am terrified by this memory, and I remember how much I loved that stuffed bunny. As an adult in my 40s, I became a victim. He told me that he could tap my phone and have me followed. Because he was the Attorney General of New York State, I knew he had the power to do it. His power was a thread that ran throughout our relationship. Over the course of about a year, I was broken down by the slapping, spitting, and choking that he inflicted on me during sex, never with my consent, and by his gaslighting, verbal and mental manipulation, which destroyed my self-esteem. I have scars running down my torso from cancer surgery. He wanted me to get plastic surgery to have my scars removed. For a while, he made me very self-conscious about my scars. Then I saw a t-shirt that said, "Scars are like tattoos, but with better stories." Many didn't believe that I could be a victim because I was educated and fierce. They didn't believe that Eric could be a perpetrator because he presented himself as a progressive hero and a feminist ally. In the months before my story of abuse became public, I told myself, don't be afraid, don't be ashamed. I decided to come forward when I realized that I was part of a pattern. It wasn't just my story. Other women shared it, and I had to tell it to prevent still others from having it become their story too. He would often say, "Assume nothing." He would also say, "Trust no one." In my relationship, I went through the classic stages that structure intimate partner violence, stages that many victims go through: control, isolation, entrapment, demeaning, abuse. I started to feel like I was in hell. My nightmares were mirrors. It was hard for me to see outside of my situation. The predator had trapped his prey. Later, I would find that friends were worried, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't want to overstep. One phone call of a friend broke the cycle of violence that I was ensnared in. She was worried because I didn't seem like myself. I seemed withdrawn and like I had lost a lot of weight. She asked one question that surprised me. Does he hit you? The answer was yes, and the scales fell from my eyes. She helped me understand that I was a victim of domestic violence and that it takes many forms: physical, verbal, emotional, digital, economic, legal. That the verbal abuse can be as stinging and etched in memory as the physical abuse. She helped me extricate myself without, as she said, poking the bear. My abuser and I broke up by phone, and seemingly without drama. A few days later, the Harvey Weinstein story broke, and a wave of women, and some men, started breaking the silence about their own abusive experiences. I decided to go public with my story, and in January 2018, I spoke with David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker magazine. The story had too much weight not to blow up. My abuser was one of the top politicians in New York State. As the New Yorker's investigation progressed, with 2 women on the record and 2 more on deep background, the allegations were credible. In May 2018, the story broke, and within 3 hours, my abuser resigned. I was fragile and exhausted, and in the morning, I fled the country on a plane to London. I felt like I had done what I needed to do. In the days and months that followed, I discovered the unexpected power of being a survivor. Because I exposed my abuser, and he left an office that he might have held for a long time, it paved the way for Letitia James to become the first female and Black Attorney General of New York State. What power looked like was being redefined in politics and in many other fields. Today, the tides that brought about those changes seem to be receding and fast. Issues and funding around domestic violence are under threat. We can't rely on governments to protect us. But women can't be oppressed and silenced for long. The pendulum will shift again. I wrote a book to help more people spot, stop, and prevent intimate partner violence. And I wrote it for another reason: to write my way out of the darkness. The book didn't just help others, it helped heal me, because even fierce women get abused. I learned that the most dangerous place in the world for a woman is in her own home. And isolating and unexpected situations, like the global pandemic that we all experienced, heightened the danger. In 2020, domestic violence was in the news more than I had ever witnessed before. Being quarantined with an abusive partner posed greater risks. UN Women reported that 1 in 2 women indicated that they or someone they know had experienced violence since the onset of COVID-19. Domestic violence reports in China nearly doubled. Eventually, lockdowns would take place in other parts of the world, and similar spikes emerged. Spain reported an 18% increase in domestic violence calls. In France, the police reported an increase of about 30% in domestic violence incidents. In Mexico, in the first 3 months of 2020, almost 1,000 women were murdered, an 8% spike from the same time the year before. Russia, which had decriminalized domestic violence in 2017, in many regions had increases as high as threefold in calls to hotlines. In the United States, where I was living, cities around the country, such as Seattle, Washington, and San Antonio, Texas, were reporting increases of more than 20% in calls to domestic violence hotlines. The data, when broken down further, becomes even more dire. Most homeless women are survivors of domestic violence. Most incarcerated women are survivors of domestic violence. These facts are not a coincidence. They reveal a system which fails to protect and then punishes survivors. Beyond the statistics lies something just as damaging: the blame. Women are blamed for staying, and they're blamed for fighting back. They're blamed for getting into the relationship in the first place. That happened to me. A friend said I should really think about what it was about me that allowed me to get involved with my abuser. And trust me, I have worked hard to understand how I could get into a relationship with someone who made me feel so bad about myself. When I met my abuser, I was recovering from a series of health crises followed by a divorce. I was secure with regard to work and friendships. I was weakened with regard to romance. Then my path intersected with his. I would later discover that he had a history of breaking strong women down. I was ripe for the breaking. It was the perfect storm. Before, I couldn't talk about my experience without feeling ashamed. Now, by telling my story, I hope that I can affect at least one person to get out of an abusive relationship, and to encourage others to go from being bystanders to upstanders. The global domestic violence statistics are so staggering that we should all be aware. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men will encounter some form of harassment, abuse, and violence in their lifetimes, most of them before they turn 30 years old. Based on these numbers, chances are that you or someone you know is a victim. The numbers increase or decrease depending on where you are in the world. One fact doesn't change: domestic violence is everywhere. We must destigmatize talking about domestic violence. We're so focused on the positive spin that we fail to talk about the issues that negatively impact us. But these are our lives. These are our experiences. These are our truths. We can embrace our woundedness and generational trauma to break the cycle of violence that is all around us. To victims and survivors, know that you are not alone and you're not crazy. It's okay to feel traumatized, but please don't feel ashamed. Don't worry about your abuser. Focus on yourself. Talk to someone you trust who can help you. Ask for what you need. You don't have to tell your story, but if you do, you can be part of the butterfly effect that realigns the universe and rebalances power. Ultimately, our North Star must be a world in which everyone feels safe, feels loved, feels seen, heard, and held. How do we get there? We have to make peace and kindness more exciting than violence. We have to advocate for domestic violence organizations that provide life-saving services. We have to stand up for the rights and dignity of everyone else and not just watch. Can we all be upstanders? Let's reach out to the loved one who we think might be in an abusive relationship. Let's not be judgmental. Let's ask questions that might elicit answers when your loved one is ready to talk. How are you? How's it going? Do you need anything? We have to address domestic violence to evolve as a people and as a society. I advocate for a future that is free of all violence. Let's pause for a moment and imagine how that future feels. It feels amazing. The poet Muriel Rukeyser wrote, "What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open." Let's split the world open together, imagining a violence-free future. Thank you so much.